Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Marketing Leaders web panel. We will get started in just a moment, but first I'd like to go over some quick information with you. Reminder of all the benefits that come with your annual subscription. You do get live monthly web meetings, which I assume you know because you're attending one. However, if you are ever unable to attend, we do record and upload these for viewing whenever is convenient for you. Please get to know our other members. You can log in to see profiles, and we're happy to make any introductions. If you're wrestling with key issues or decisions, we strongly encourage you to reach out to the other members. It's very easy to post questions, and our community of fellow professionals is always happy to help. After each meeting, we generate summaries with key takeaways and learning nuggets so you can easily reference them and put them into action. There are many other benefits, but just wanted to highlight a few. Now, if at any time you have a question, please click anywhere on the slide and post it under comments. I will open the forum for live questions at the end of the discussion. Now, let's meet the speakers. We're going to be discussing today creative teams in-house versus agency versus hybrid, kind of thrown in at the end. Lisa, let me start with you. If you could please introduce yourself and tell us your title and where you come from.
Sure, certainly. I'm from the Mount Sinai Health System in New York City. We have 8 hospitals system-wide, and we have a hybrid of in-house agency creative people as well as an agency of records. So I look forward to the discussion, and I'm the Senior Director of Marketing and Operations.
Fantastic. Sergio, same question. Oh, I'm sorry, Sergio's the one that hasn't shown up yet. Gorguin?
Hi, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I'm the one without the picture. I'm the Director of Strategy and Planning for Turner Construction's New York business unit. We have 46 offices nationally, and I would say that we are decentralized in terms of our marketing and creative approach. So we rely heavily on our in-house teams. But at the same time, we do tend to go out to agencies or consultants to help with a little, brand DNA and a little gut check. So thank you again for inviting me.
Excellent. All right, Hannah, it is your turn. Who are you?
Hi, I'm Hannah Hamza, and I am a creative director at RTI International, which is Research Triangle Institute. And we are located in Research Triangle in North Carolina. We are an interesting group. We have about 6,000 researchers there and actually all over the world. And we have an in-house team of creatives, and I'm over the video and motion department. But we also have kind of a separate corporate comms group and different business units that are broken up and somewhat siloed. So we work with a mix of the in-house creative team, but we do a lot of government contracting. It's about 80% of our work. So we also work with contractors and small businesses to meet some of those requirements. So we have an interesting mix at our organization.
Okay, this should be a good conversation then. All right, so let's get right into it. How do you think it is best to balance the corporate and the creative? Lisa, let's start with you.
Yeah, so that's a great question. When it comes to the creative, I think that the nice thing about in-house is that your in-house professionals know your brand the best. They can eat, sleep, breathe the vision and the mission, and they understand how branding looks in terms of the creative materials and collateral. I just think that the branding on the other side of the agency world can be a little bit more agility oriented, and they can be a little bit rapid with the changes that need to be made. One example of last year was I needed an agency that just flipped the switch with telemedicine because we were, going from COVID to having everyone come into the office to having everyone go to telemedicine. And I have to say, I really was happy to have had an agency be able to flip everything, the creative, the search engine marketing, all of our digital campaigns went probably within 1 to 2 weeks, and I've never done a campaign that fast in my life. I think in-house sometimes, the one downside of in-house could be a little bit of, stagnation in terms of their creative flexibility, just able to flip the switch. But like I said, they're the ones that breathe the branding. So I would say start with your goals to say, what are my creative goals here for this year? And what am I going to need? And then kind of identify the skill set that you need on the in-house side. If you're using an external agency, the skill set on the external agency, but really, really consider agility. Nothing taught me a better lesson than in 2020, having to go through COVID. That agility really with being able to swap campaigns is absolutely critical. And then, take the back step of the tools and the platforms later. Everybody's going to get you metrics at some way, shape, or form. But I would say let that be, a backside rather than a forward side when you're considering like your needs and goals for the year.
Excellent. Okay. Gorguin, same question.
Sure. I would say that we rely heavily on our in-house teams. And that being said, our focus primarily on B2B is primarily driven by our ability to respond to proposals and RFPs. And when we start talking about creative, we don't necessarily build, campaigns that say, Lisa's team that would span, years or have a need to quickly pivot to satisfy a current market condition. So with that being said, again, we rely very heavily on our in-house teams, and the expectation is that they have that intimacy with the brand, that they could very quickly deliver creative that's in line with some of our current messaging. That being said, I think there's definite value to having an external agency just provide a little bit of oversight and some strategic direction, because sometimes you become a little too intimate with your brand, and it's hard to bring the objectivity that I find an external agency would bring to the table. So that would be my sort of 2 cents on how best to balance. I think for us the ideal structure would really be having an agency to provide the direction, and then relying on our in-house teams to execute. In so much as that we don't necessarily build large social media campaigns. We're not buying ad space at the volume of a Sinai or another sort of organization is. Yeah.
Well, as a follow-up to that, then, and Hannah, this one's going to be for you. So Bank of America's in-house team is forced to work under agencies that control the company's media planning, spending, and buying. This leaves their in-house team free to, quote-unquote, be creative within a template. Do you think this is the best way to foster creativity?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I'm not in their in-house team. I can speak for myself, being on the creative side and being a creative director, having come from a large agency to work at RTI. There was a lot of frustration with coming in and sort of having things set for us. And that was actually one of the things that I have tried to work really hard on, is allowing us to be the brand ambassadors, being the lead on those things. I get it where maybe we have some gaps or things like that. And maybe that was what Bank of America had with, I think Sergio mentioned, or Gorguin mentioned, with ad spend and some of these campaigns. But I think in terms of being able to set the creative direction, and even some of the strategy, I think there's a beauty, because as a creative or, creative leader within the in-house, I have all those relationships with the head marketing folks and, what we would call, our internal, clients or colleagues, collaborators. So I have that inside knowledge, of what they're trying to go after, what their goals are, who their audience is, and just, being able to come up with those things for me, that would be really hard just to have that stuff, that template set for me. I don't know that would make me feel the most creative, again, from my perspective. But I think I'm really big on collaboration. I've heard from a lot of larger companies like that, and actually Taco Bell Design, where they were being sort of dictated to, and they weren't really either able to talk to the agency of record or be able to collaborate with them. So I think that would be a difficult place to be in, again, in my perspective. But I think the more that you can have a collaboration and open communication, so if an agency was sort of dictating some of those things, or the templates that you need to use, you could understand, why, and have some input as the person who's closest to the brand, and coming up with it. And I find that's usually where our strong suit is when we come to the table early and as the creative team and are able to actually give input if we're working with an outside agency on, maybe why we should do certain things, from the perspective of the brand. So.
Makes sense. And Lisa, I'm going to ask you as well. So what do you think about the ability for an in-house team to be creative within a template?
So we have a little bit of that going on with a hybrid of our agency kind of creating some kind of templates. I really agree with Hannah that the earlier on that everybody gets on the same page with what is our message and how are we conveying this needs to be addressed as soon as possible, because you don't want to have your agency dictating a whole message that, like, we kind of had just like an intellectual messaging that went on in a lot of our print ads, to the point at which it was too academic. I mean, we are an academic institution and that's great, but some people and patients were even saying, I don't even get your ads. So it was causing a disconnect, and it caused us to have to kind of evolve and kind of temper that down. But I think had there been a stronger conversation with not just chairmen and some high-level leaders, but everybody in the agency on both the in-house side and the external side, to say, are we speaking to the demographics that we're trying to reach? I think really trying to understand your consumer behavior of who is, like, either buying your product, whether you're working B2B or B2C, what is our target demo? And then are we speaking exactly to them? I think that we had a misfire a couple of years ago when we spoke over their heads, and it became this, kind of antagonistic in-house and external agencies. Like, why did we do this? And why did we spend so much money on it? Because it wasn't really necessarily driving the patient volume that we were looking for. I will say one aspect that I really strongly advocate inside in-house ad agency is our social media team. Our social media is actually 100% done inside, and I love it. And I am a big advocate of, let's get an agency input and let's get their agility and their expertise on board if you could, and they'll go at multiple budgets, ranging from very small to very large. But the social media team, not just with the understanding of the brand, but understanding how their role fits into both the ad agencies as well as the creative, as well as the stakeholders, meaning all of the departments within the hospital and also our school. They really, really have a great handle on how to be agile with messaging and with market conditions. Like it was mentioned earlier that, just having COVID come on board kind of had us flipping the switch. But I will say, if you are contemplating outsourcing social media for that particular aspect, I'm a giant advocate of keeping that in-house. You're able to just talk to these people on a daily basis about timing, about messaging, about imaging, about creative. And I just think that was really, really beneficial over the last, at least 10 years that I've been there, to just see that evolve and to see what kind of benefits that they can bring to individual stakeholders as well as your overarching brand. But on the whole, the templating on the whole, I just think it can get a little restrictive. Like Hannah said, the earlier the better, that everybody gets on board with the messaging and makes sure that it's targeting the demographics that you're trying to reach. And then if you could even splinter those demographics into different geographic areas, or if you have different B2B type of clients or different types of products, I think that, even the lower level needs to be addressed as well as the higher level.
Makes sense. Gorguin, do you have a opinion on the free to be creative within a template?
Yeah, I think, not understanding Bank of America's structure completely, I would think that the process started with an in-house team producing a body of research on their customer base and profiles and journeys, so that the agency then can create this template, which ultimately would get blessed by BOA's internal team. So it would be, this collaboration from the onset, where the client's driving the template, and then you rely on the agency's sort of expertise to take what you're giving them and really operationalize it into a plan. Now, coming back to what Lisa had mentioned, I strongly feel that there are certain marketing platforms that should remain in-house, because it gives you that agility and the immediacy to be able to pivot. We went through a lot in 2020, and knowing the agency sort of client relationship, I don't think a lot of companies would have had the ability to change their messaging mid 2020, especially on platforms like social media, where there is this immediacy, where when you're putting messages out, these messages really live for maybe like a minute, and then they're pushed down. So you need to have a strong internal social media team to be able to capture on all of that dialogue that's going on and really capitalize it. So with that regard, I see the agency as being able to take what the research, the body of work that we're giving them, and create this template that we agree to, and then we work within that framework. But at the same time, things like social media, I think, should definitely remain with an in-house team. Also, because there are discussions that happen on a day-to-day basis that the agency isn't necessarily privy to, and I think in trying to communicate the dialogues that happen internally to an agency, to have them then feed back some form of execution, you end up being behind the eight ball, or late to the game, late to the discussion.
All right, so as a follow-up to that, because it seems that everybody's kind of on the same page with, we at least need to keep social media in-house just so that everybody can be as flexible as possible. But one of the theories is on the higher level stuff, that in-house bureaucracy and the groupthink that comes with it naturally stifles creativity. Agree or disagree? Gorguin?
I would agree. And the reason why I would agree, I could get in trouble for this, but I think, based on my experience, and, I started my career as doing quant and qual research for big brands and agencies. So it was my responsibility to understand their creative execution and give them suggestions as to how, their execution could work harder. Transitioning to, a B2B world, what I found is that if the executive understands and trusts the capacity and the capability of their in-house team, then it's a win-win relationship. But if the executive is going to not necessarily second guess, but not place as much value on their in-house experience as they would on an agency, then you have these relationships where, they want a third party or an agency input, at which point, you're just slowing down the process and you're stifling creativity. But at the same time, I would challenge all in-house teams to approach whatever they're working on, whether it's an ad or a brochure or a social media campaign, that when they do develop the creative, to approach it from an agency mindset, and that you have a certain level of objectivity to be able to take a step back and look at what you've produced and really, wholeheartedly say if it's working or if it's going to work to the extent that you expect it to. And I think sometimes in-house teams become a little too close to the product, and they have a difficult time changing creative direction. That would be my sort of thought on stifling creativity.
Hannah, what do you think?
I agree to some extent. I think one of the things that we've experienced in my organization, again, I've been there 3.5 years, there was a lot of that in the beginning where, some distrust of the in-house team and feeling like going to an agency was going to ultimately be better. It's kind of like the shiny new thing, going to an agency. And that kind of dictated a lot of the process until, after a while, they got burned by different agencies and then came back to us to fix something, and then we were the hero when something had to get out
on webinar. Sorry.
Everybody's still there?
To get out on time.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Anyways, and so we ended. Oh, I just was saying. So, anyways, we ended up as the creative team, in-house creative team, sort of saving the day when some of these agency relationships failed. They weren't able to deliver on time, so on and so forth. And I think that was sort of the pivot point for us in terms of, as a creative team, developing those relationships and securing sort of that trust with different people within the organization, and really turn the tide to say, hey, we can build a really talented in-house team if you all are invested in it. And we can get the same top talent that you get at agencies. We have people from agencies. I think a lot of it is not knowing what's even available and just, immediately saying, okay, well, agency is going to be better. And the more wins that we got, the more sort of realization that the red tape, some of that bureaucracy went away. And we didn't necessarily have groupthink, and we were able to be, creative and outside the box. I think what happens a lot of times is people can't see it until you show it to them. So we kind of came at it from that mentality of like, hey, let's just go ahead and put some things out. Let's create a couple of spec pieces. Let's show them what we can do. And then that really continued that relationship and allowing us to do more creative work. I think another aspect of that is just the idea of being able to, really, kind of come outside of the box. And as you develop those relationships, I always treated people as clients as I did in an agency when I worked there, and still providing them same kind of experience in terms of pitching the creative and coming up with concepts. When I got there too, a lot of it was just like, oh, well, I'm just going to go show so-and-so something. And I'm like, no. Let's do it in the way that we would do it if we were in an agency. And that, again, kind of leveled up the playing field and allowed them to still feel like they were getting the same experience, if you will, that they were at an agency. So I feel like these different ways that we approach leveling up our creative team, as well as being able to show the value of it, really allowed all that to kind of go away, that bureaucracy, the groupthink, and allowed, us to do more creative work, and then ultimately have more happy creatives that were on the team.
If I could, Lisa, Sarah, if I could jump in for just 1 second.
Absolutely.
I think, Hannah, what you just said is spot on. I think, when I came over to Turner, there was this notion that you would produce a creative and present it. And we said, no, we have to adopt that agency model, because then it'll build our credibility. So whether it was, a journal ad or some sort of campaign, it's like, let's develop 3 distinct creative executions, provide the background and the understanding for each, and present it. Let's treat them as if they're our clients. And when you start doing that, they start understanding that, a lot more thought is going into producing this creative. There's a simple messaging platform, but now they've given me 3 different creative executions, and then you start, exploring what works and what doesn't work, and it just gives them that agency experience, but with the immediacy of an in-house sort of execution. So that's a great point.
And if I could just jump in for a moment to say I totally agree with both of you, and amazing points on both behalves. The only thing that I would add to that is to, avert the stifling of the in-house is to also use data to back up what your storytelling is, not just at the end, but try to do some A/B testing along the way if your agency is not already doing this once it does get approved. I had a really big learning lesson over a social media A/B testing. We did only patient stories on one side and we did only service line marketing for the other side. And the patient stories drove so many more clicks. It was appalling that we had even thought of just doing service line advertising instead of, either a combination of both or the majority being like, let the patients tell the story and be the advocates for some of this. So that would be my only other addition to the whole conversation is let the data drive that story and then take that A/B testing and go back to your individual stakeholders and say, hey, this is resonating with the audience. And just to both Hannah's point and Gordon's point, that'll build up your credibility.
Great. Well, I've got another follow-up question to that. And Lisa, I'm going to go ahead and ask it to you. How and when should your internal creative team mature into an in-house creative agency? It sounds like that's kind of where everybody's headed.
Yeah. So, what's interesting, when I first began at Mount Sinai, we primarily had just an in-house agency. It grew into external agencies because of the fact that we grew so big as a unit and as a health system that we needed to have the external agencies kind of be there to back us. I will say, pending your budgets and pending your needs, you can get this done with an in-house ad agency. I think there are certain components that you can't necessarily replace, like, say, for example, a search engine marketing vendor. As much as you want to bring that in-house, if you ever have the one person that's in charge of SEM on your team go away for an extended vacation, or if they quit and there's an extended period of time between hiring that person again, and then there's no transition of knowledge, brand, vision, mission, budgets, I think that without question, you should seek to have an SEM vendor. I would say that's the critical one to pull outside, because they're going to be constantly monitoring your data. And this is where, at least our stakeholders at Mount Sinai that are, they're all scientists and they want to know data. And the first thing they ask you about is data. So for them to be providing constant reports of metrics has been extremely helpful. Yes, you can build dashboards inside, but what I like about having an agency do this function is because it's out there every day, right? You've got Google Ads out there every single solitary day of your campaign. It goes on 24/7. Even if you try to turn off times, people are writing down phone numbers. You need to have the agility of that agency to say, hey, you know what, these keywords just aren't working. I had an incident a couple of years ago. I put in thyroid cancer as part of one of my search engine marketing campaigns, and it almost ate up my whole budget because it was an informational type of term and it wasn't like a turnkey conversion term. So as soon as we dropped that out, all of my costs went down, but it took the agency to be on calls with us saying, what's happening here? Why are we burning through our budget in too early of a cycle? So I would not advocate for, like, you can always have somebody point inside to say I'm point for all the search engine marketing campaigns, but you need that ad agency to just constantly be vigilant. Otherwise, you're burning money. At least I from my experience, there's just going to be glitches, especially early on in these search engine marketing campaigns, that maybe somebody in-house is not going to catch. And for that matter, it's just worth the cost alone to do it outside. I feel like their costs are pretty reasonable. And for what you get out of that in terms of the metrics, in terms of the conference calls that go on and on over vigilance of cost per click, cost per calls, and every little piece of data that's in there. Did I reach the right zip codes, and where am I trying to target next? And is this group of terms working? There's too many moving parts. I would say without question, go outside for the search engine marketing. You can always have somebody in-house. And then, if people are pulling back in-house, I get that the creative messaging can happen in-house. I don't think any one of us would disagree with that. The branding can happen in-house. Certainly some great graphic designers can make this splashy, but for some very metrics-oriented information like search engine marketing, I'm still an advocate of paying that outside ad agency.
All right, Gorguin, same question to you. What do you think about, or when should an internal creative team mature into an in-house creative agency? or in what instances, I should say?
Okay, so our approach, or my approach, has always been that when developing any campaign, any process, I keep two words in mind, right? Sustainable and scalable. So to Lisa's point, for us, a lot of things that we do, we're a construction company, and we're still, my team is still proving the concept, if you will. So when we start talking about search engine marketing, it's our responsibility to introduce the concept, perhaps run a pilot campaign, and say, look, this is something that we should be focusing on, and it's something that we should work into our marketing plan. Now, what we propose, is it sustainable by our team? More times than not, to Lisa's point, it simply isn't. If you're spending, 4 hours or 6 hours a day just going through voluminous, like just spreadsheets of data and trying to understand how everything relates, then that's not sustainable, and you're gonna burn your team out. So I approach it in this way, and like, can we sustain it? More times than not, you can't sustain an SCM oversight internally. And then also, does it lend itself to scalability? Can we scale it? Now, does that mean that we're going to have to hire on additional resources? Are we willing to make that commitment? More times than not, that's a far greater commitment than going to an agency and having them provide that oversight. So I would say it really starts with understanding, your current in-house resources. Are you willing to dedicate the human and the financial resources necessary to grow the team? And what you're putting together, can it weather certain spikes in the economy? If the first thing we're going to do is pull back marketing budgets when the economy softens, then maybe we're setting ourselves up for failure. And if we just simply engage an outside agency, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a traditional agency. I think with the current sort of gig economy, you have freelancers out there that are providing the same level of agency sort of care and oversight at a much more sort of cost-effective price point. So again, I think a lot of it comes down to is what you're introducing, is it sustainable and is it scalable? And then at the same time, is this your wheelhouse, right? For us, we're a construction company. It's difficult for us to attract, I would say, agency-type talent and support and nurture them, their professional development. So again, it makes sense to go out. Now, coming back to social media, I think that's one thing that resides internally, and you build your teams accordingly. So that's my sort of perspective on how you should mature your team. And then the other actually interesting component too is how much are you willing to invest in your team's professional development? If we have individuals that have demonstrated a lot of talent, are we going to grow them and develop them to a point where they recognize perhaps this environment isn't in line with their overall career goals? So again, I think it comes back to development as well. And that's sort of my perspective on how to mature it.
Great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and ask Hannah the same question, but I'm going to go ahead and ask a follow-up, so kind of cover it at the same time. What role should organizations play in supporting and encouraging their creative team's professional and skills development?
Okay. I would agree with what everyone said a moment ago. I think the only thing I'll add to it, and then I'll discuss the other question, is just from my perspective, we are a little different in my organization because, like I mentioned before, not only do we do corporate, but we also work on, projects for the CDC and the FDA and, all these big government clients, as well as grants and foundations. So in terms of, scalability factor and just the investment, it definitely for us, it really does matter if it's a really specialized kind of niche thing that we're only going to need on this particular project for, let's say, like the DOJ or something like that. It's very different when we're talking about, corporate, because our group really flexes between the two, which is interesting and not like any other organization I've ever been into or worked at. So one of the things that we always look at is say, okay, it's more of a mindset. When I got there, it was very much this group is a service organization. That's all it is. It's like they get, kind of like they are note takers, right? It's like they get an order, they write it down, and then they do it. And when I came in, again, from a very different place, I was like, oh, no, we can't. This is not going to work for creatives. This is not going to help them develop in their careers. To your point, we're not going to retain talent if this is how we are going to treat this creative team and being more of a service organization versus being an agency. So my kind of mandate coming in was, okay, this is sort of this ragtag group that have come from different places in the organization. Let's try to centralize a little bit more and figure out kind of the strategy going forward and how can we be sustainable from a cost perspective, because the way we have to do billing is very different than probably most organizations, how we bill our time. And then how can we really develop our talent and our creative so that we can have top tier talent and be just as competitive with outside agencies. So that was really the mandate coming in. And so, my sort of approach to that was, okay, let's do a skills assessment. Let me pull the whole team together. Again, they were getting kind of information from all places of the organization. There was no centralized project management. There was no centralized way of projects coming in or helping with corporate. Corporate at that time was using mostly outside agencies. I was like, oh gosh. So we had a huge task, right, to centralize this group, to really say, like, cast a vision forward. And I think that was the first part, is saying, like, this is where we want to go. A lot of people that were working there at the time didn't come from an agency background. We're kind of scared, to be honest with you, if they could cut it. But at the same time, we sort of cast a vision of this is what's possible, because RTI is an incredible company with an incredible mission of improving the human condition. And it's all about getting science into the hands of the lay people and helping them understand the research and what's going on. I mean, everything from COVID-19 research to marijuana research to neonatal care. I mean, it's just across the gamut that they have different projects in. So by coming together, trying to help centralize the group a little bit more, casting that vision, and then doing a skills assessment and saying, okay, what do we have internally? What do we need? And really figuring out, again, we didn't have certain roles that were very important in terms of changing sort of the landscape of this and making it more into an agency. Copywriters, art directors, these positions didn't exist at RTI before. So being able to ramp up, get the right kind of talent that we needed, and then helping bring the others along that have value, and helping them sort of restructure the way in which it was working, as well as then taking each person kind of through their own career and skills assessment individually, as a creative leader, meeting with them and really figuring out, okay, what's their trajectory, what's their path forward, and how can we help them get there? And RTI is really good at professional development in terms of resources and what's available. So everything from, getting a certificate or going maybe to a particular workshop, or, I started implementing these things called creative salons every week, where we would have the whole creative team meet, and, we would discuss either certain campaigns, things that are working, different trends. I'd have each person even bring in stuff that they're working on, outside of work. Maybe it's an art project. We had somebody that was doing a short animated film, and being able to really actually highlight every single person on the team's creativity, even outside of work, actually was amazing, because what it did was not only develop the team, but it allowed them to realize, oh, so-and-so, I didn't realize he painted outside of work. And pulling these ideas actually helped us become better creatives, coming up with concepts, because then we came up with a concept actually for a research project and used this guy's ability to, he was paint it amazing watercolor, anyways, and then put it into a digital form and create this whole campaign around it. And the clients absolutely loved it. It was completely outside the box, anything they would have done. But honestly, I don't think we would have even known to come up with that concept, because we wouldn't have known that he had that talent. Because on a day-to-day basis, we're not sitting at our desk doing painting, you know? So I think being able to find ways outside like that to pull in people's other interests and talent and keeping them fed and keeping them creatively inspired is so important when you're talking about, you know, developing your team and having people feel like they have opportunities. Because let's be honest, you know, a lot of times it's not a sexy work that we do, right? From the creative standpoint, a lot of times people will look and say, oh, well, you know, if I was at this agency, I'd be doing this or that. But I think having the mentality and the mindset is so important to approach every single project of like, don't limit yourself. Don't think about what they did last year and how they put this out, or, you know, maybe what corporate is doing. Let's think about it. What is the best way to tell the story? That's what I'm all about, is how can we tell this story in the best way? So then we'll start thinking about what the methodology is, what the platform is, what's that going to look like. But don't limiting ourselves to saying, oh, well, they did customer testimonials, so we're going to do that again. Or they did, you know, this or that. But really thinking outside the box of what's going to be the most engaging way to tell this story. And I think that continues to keep the creative team inspired and on their toes, because they can't just, you know, pass the buck and say, okay, well, I'm just going to do it again like I did last time. Because not only do they get bored, you know, and then frustrated as a creative and then, you know, perhaps want to leave the organization, but it also, you know, allows them to realize like, hey, we can't just phone it in, you know, we really have to always bring our A game and come up with something new. So I think those, and then, you know, we're all working at home in this weird landscape. So trying to figure out new ways of engaging talent when you're, you know, on Zoom and being able to have either Slack or whatever you have in your organization. You know, we have a creative inspiration channel, right? I'm constantly throwing stuff up at my team, different videos, different, you know, articles, different things. And I think constantly, you know, just doing that, putting things out there for people to look at and have conversations around, particularly when, you know, there's a lot of isolation, that has really helped keep my team engaged and you know, and excited about the work that we do there.
I love that. Lisa, do you have any thoughts on encouraging and supporting internal creative teams?
But the only thing I would add to that, because Hannah's answer was so helpful, the only thing I would add to that is that I think that we have some competitions that work out very well. We take about 3 of our creative people and say, hey, you guys might be point for this particular campaign. Why don't you give it your best shot? Sort of what, like Hannah was saying, like be agile, be creative, like push the boundaries. And on occasion, then the whole entire marketing department votes for, you know, whichever one. And I feel like that kind of keeps their inspiration humming along, and they're looking at other ads. I think sometimes it's easy to forget your competition and to see what all of your competition is doing at the same time. And that makes them kind of go seek those other ideas and say, well, what if I did a different twist on that? And that certainly has just also fueled a little bit of competition within the department. So, you know, they'll put up to 3 and, you know, have a vote. We'll have lively discussions about what's speaking to what demographics and why and what we feel will be most powerful. So I think like if you just have, it doesn't have to be an ongoing competitive thing, but if you just feel like you really need to push outside the boundaries of where your entire creativity is at that moment, try a competition on your team.
I love all of these suggestions. Gorguin, do you have anything else to add to that one?
No, I think we covered it quite well. I think, you know, that the point about letting the teams get creative, whether it's through some sort of competition or even having a jam session where they just, you know, where they just throw out concepts and they see if those concepts have legs and they pursue them, I think is key, because, you know, in the B2B world, sometimes we get very, you know, I don't want to say complacent, but, you know, you have a track and you follow the track and you know, sometimes creative suffers. So to be able to get everyone a little uncomfortable and get those creative ideas flowing and out there, I think is is very key. Also, it helps to retain the talent because you're telling them that, we're looking for your creativity. We're looking for something that is not your standard B2B model. So I think everything that was said is just spot on. Yeah.
All right, then I'm going to ask you our last question as well. And actually, I'm going to put everybody on mute real quick. I'm sorry, we're getting a lot of background noise. So bear with me 1 second. And for my speakers to come off mute, you're just going to need to hit *6. So give me 1 second. Let me do that.
Would you like your guests to be able to unmute their... All guests have been muted.
Okay.
You will now rejoin the meeting.
All right, speakers, if you would hit *6 for me so I can hear you again. And I'm going to go ahead and ask Gorguin. Let's see. Last question. Okay. New companies or companies who do not have a dedicated creative team are planning to start using these resources. Would you recommend agency, in-house, or a hybrid?
That's tough. I think, I was in that position. I was in that position actually several times with a startup where I was charged with developing messaging, developing the identity, profiling the customers, and I would say that if you're a company that has an individual or you have a marketer who has the adequate, let's say, level of agency experience, I think the best thing is to start out with a hybrid model. You rely very heavily on that internal talent to develop the messaging, to develop the program, but at the same time, sort of understand their capacity and go out to an agency or to even freelancers to help support and bring whatever creative or whatever campaign is being developed to light. And I think, after you pursue that sort of that model for a bit, you can start making the decisions as to whether or not you want to invest more on your internal team, or if it just, this nimble 2-person, 3-person sort of internal structure with an agency there to support it is effective. And the other thing I'll say is what I've noticed more and more, when we go out to some of our print vendors or some of our third-party vendors, they've started building in-house agencies themselves. So when we go out and we want to produce a printed piece, on the other side of the table or the Zoom call, you have experienced agency folk that can help guide you and give you the assistance you need to make sure that printed piece sort of fits within a campaign. And they can even, we've had instances where one of our vendors has helped actually build a campaign for us and has given us suggestions as to other collateral that we could produce. So I would say the hybrid model initially, I think, is an ideal approach, and then based on the effectiveness, you could begin to focus, more agency or start building out your in-house teams.
That makes sense. Lisa, do you have an opinion? In-house, agency, or hybrid?
Yes, I'm in full agreement about the hybrid. I think that I would take it down one more granular step to identify what do you have in-house in terms of expertise. You probably should have a public relations official. God forbid you ever need crisis management. That person should be inside. You probably should have content marketing inside. You should probably have your website development inside because you're going to need to be flexible with that at all times. I would say take the SEM outside, the digital marketing, and then keep somebody inside for social media and let the rest kind of fall into place. Like photography, you can definitely outsource. But I would say those key components, your public relations official, your content marketing strategy is going to come from there. And then your website development, absolutely critical to have inside. Outside, absolutely get your digital marketing, your search engine marketing outside there, and keep your social media inside is my best recommendation. But this all can be done on low budgets. Just as he was mentioning, you don't have to have a full-blown agency to take care of the expertise that you're missing inside. But you're also just way out too. What is going to happen if somebody's not at their desk? Somebody's on vacation, somebody quit, you're in between hiring. Have a backup plan for that. And that can either be in-house or it can be with your agency. But it is nice that agencies, like you said, are coming with multiple expertise too. So it could be just something else that you negotiate, maybe as a backup service. But for sure, I'm a hybrid all the way.
Fair enough. All right, Hannah, we've got 2 votes for hybrid. What are your thoughts?
I don't have much to add. I totally agree with that. I mean, I think it's the most agile approach, right? I think when you're talking about a small business or, a startup, you don't you don't know what you don't know yet. I think that when you put all of your eggs in one basket, it may not be scalable, it may not be sustainable, right? Going back to that conversation, I think when you keep the key things in-house, like we just talked about, then I think you have the ability to flex. And like you said, it doesn't have to be a full-blown agency. There are plenty of, freelancers, and that's what we use. A lot of times we'll use freelancers or, contract employees for one specific, very, like I said, niche type of a thing that we don't want to put all of our resources in because maybe, their time isn't going to be billable for, 40 hours for the next year, right? So I think that helps us be, much more agile and nimble in terms of our approach. So I 100% agree. I don't have a whole lot to add. I think that what they've said is, spot on.
All right, so hybrid for the win then. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. We are now out of official questions. I'm going to open it up for any questions that we have from the audience. Audience, if you would like to ask a question, just click anywhere on the slide and hit comment. Or if you'd like to ask a question live, you can hit *6 and ask it live. And let me give just a minute to see if anybody's got anything. All right. Well then, before we sign off, Lisa, do you have any closing words? And you don't have to, no pressure.
No, I would just say, just from the very onset, I'm a big fan of let's look at the macro picture first, and then let's look at the micro picture. So take your macro. What's your message? What's your vision? How's this going to go into your overall messaging? Take that down a couple of notches. Evaluate your expertise of what you have in-house currently, what you desperately need outsourced, and then, get your RFPs in, do your analysis. I think the more you talk to these agencies, the more you're going to find your fit just in terms of how comfortable you are with them, how comfortable you are in terms of their dictation of what is going to happen. And also, with their flexibility, agility, please ask, if you are exploring new agencies, how long it would be to swap campaigns. I think in my experience, sometimes they give you a lot of attention at first, and then like 2 quarters into the year, they can't be found. Make sure that doesn't happen to you because you are going to have instances where your messaging might need to change, or it just might be time to refresh it and you don't want your agency to be lost. So overall, hybrid all the way, and evaluate what you have, what you want. And if you want to move into a full in-house ad agency, it's possible. I would still be an advocate of taking that search engine marketing outside.
Love it. Gorguin, do you have any final remarks?
Yeah, I think, in my years, it's refreshing to see, the proliferation of in-house creative teams. I think that's very refreshing, and it's something that is going to continue. But, at the same time, what's been surprising me over the past 10 years is the fact that a lot of these agencies have become a lot more nimble, and they're changing their business model to really support the B2B marketer. And at times, in the past, that necessarily wasn't the case. You had to take the entire agency with you. But now you can almost, as Lisa was saying, you could pull bits and pieces to support your internal teams. And I find that to be very, I've personally found that to be very rewarding, where you can commit to SEM, but you can still hold on to certain aspects and give your team that sense of fulfillment that they so desperately need, and seeing their ideas come to fruition. So yeah, I think it was a great conversation all around.
Absolutely. And Hannah, you're last. Do you have any final closing comments?
I guess I would just say, again, from my perspective, is, collaborate and support your in-house creative team, and come to them, like I said, to bring them to the table early and have those conversations as you're thinking and assessing agencies, and going out and sending RFPs and looking at all of that. I would get their input, because a lot of them, might have relationships at agencies, might have experience in their past, working experience and things like that. It's good to have those conversations and not shy away from them and feeling like, you have to control it or make those decisions. Yes, you don't want to open it up, I think, and have, decision by committee necessarily. But I would say if you have a trusted, leader within your creative group, talk to them, have those conversations, collaborate. I think it will make the process so much smoother as you're thinking about the different areas in which you're going to rely on your in-house creative team, and then the areas in which you're going to rely on either, contractors or agencies and things like that. I just go back to that. I feel like every time, there's been bumps or things that didn't work out well, it was because I think all the stakeholders that needed to be weren't brought to the table. So I would say have those conversations and be strategic, right? And be able to, brainstorm with your in-house creative team of where, from a strategy perspective, where do you want to take it? Where are you going to go this year? And getting that input early and often is super helpful, because you will be surprised at some of the campaigns, some of the concepts, some of the ideas that will come from your in-house team. That will surprise you, and you'll be able to, even from an execution standpoint, we've had this before where, we were able to come up with this huge, grand idea, but just from a resourcing standpoint, it made sense to actually get some of the content created from a larger agency that had more people. And so you never know where those great concepts and ideas are going to come from. And I would say just don't discount your creative team and collaborate with them, because they will help you and help that relationship with that agency or that contractor be seamless and be smooth if you've got them, that relationship and that trust.
Could not agree more. All right. Well, I would like to thank everybody for coming and taking the time to be with us today. I really enjoyed this panel. I hope everyone else did as well. Lisa, Gorguin, and Hannah, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to speak to us. Don't forget, check out the website in a few days if you'd like to listen to this or any of our other previous panels. And I hope to talk to you all again next month. So thank you all and have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much. It's been so fun. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot, Sarah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
I have got to pee so